The police looked around the house and didn't see anything. As they were leaving, they decided to check underneath the house. As they looked under the house, they found a toolbox. Curious, the police opened the toolbox and were horrified at what they saw. It's Desheena's birthday, and her grandmother gives her a call. But she doesn't answer. This is pretty strange because her grandmother always hears from her granddaughter on her birthday. The fact that she didn't call, even though she knows Grandma has those bomb-ass gifts, disturbed her greatly. As she sat back and thought about it, she hadn't heard from her granddaughter within a few days. Weeks, maybe. Yes, Desheena loves her independence, and she usually lives life to the fullest, but this was highly unlike her. Her grandmother would reach out to one of her daughters, Desheena's aunt, and ask her to drive by and do a welfare check. She was very concerned, but tried to reason that maybe there was some other reason why Desheena hasn't called. I mean, when it's my birthday, I'm usually trying to recover from the hangover the night before, so I may not call anyone the day of. She notices Desheena's car is out front and she can hear her dog on the inside barking. Initially, there's no answer. She assumed that maybe her niece is sleeping in, but as she's getting ready to leave, the neighbors come up to her and asked if she was here for Desheena. She said that she was. The neighbors had said they had not seen her for a while and that her car had stayed out there in the same place for a week, unmoved. Her aunt asked them if she should be concerned, and the neighbors said yes. The neighbors told the aunt about several domestic incidents that recently occurred that was a cause for concern. This very much worried her aunt. At this time, she called the police. Her family would plaster her face all over social media, as well as call the local news, hoping to gain additional exposure for their missing family member. They found a lot of frustrations with the police. They felt as though they weren't helping as much and that they weren't taking this case as serious as the family was taking it. I mean, the police felt like she was an adult. If she wanted to go missing, who's to stop her? But the family knew that this was not normal and they were screaming to be heard. Gabby Petito was all over the news, but no one was talking about Desheena's disappearance. Police weren't looking for Desheena, and that let Desheena's family down greatly because where is their help? News outlets were not sharing her information, so they had to get creative. They had to go to lesser-known outlets to get the word out about the disappearance of Desheena. As weeks passed, Desheena's family felt helpless and asked for the community to jump in, which they gladly did. More and more people were sharing her story on social media and searching for Desheena. Well, everybody except for one person. For 10 years, she was in an on and off relationship with John. Via accounts, John was a pretty okay guy. He hung out with Desheena's family members. Her mother liked him. He was very much welcomed. Although she loved him very much, their relationship was rocky. People thought that John had something to do with her disappearance. At the minimum, he knew something. Police would eventually reach out to John to talk to him about Desheena's disappearance. But he explained that they had broken up several weeks prior and he hadn't had any contact with her. He told the police that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. In fact, Desheena was suicidal. She had threatened to take her life when the relationship was ending. Now, some of you might be thinking, no, John. But hear me out. John had a bit of supporting evidence on his side. Well, particularly one piece of supporting evidence. There was a call made to the police not too long ago by Desheena's aunt who lived out of town. She reached out to the police to alert them to an issue that was happening at John's home. John called her aunt and told him that Desheena was there threatening to kill herself because he didn't want to be back with her. The aunt called the police and told them that she wasn't sure what was happening, but she was afraid that her niece may harm herself because of the relationship's demise. When the police showed up, Desheena was in the car with a scratch to her hand. She explained that she locked herself out of the house and she had came over to John to get the spare key that he had. He refused to give her the key, and at that time she got mad, pounded on the glass, and it broke, cutting her hand. John told the police that she was trying to attack him, and he was defending himself. During the encounter, Desheena said that John tries to make her look crazy, but that's not the case. The police were unable to figure out who to believe, so they sent Desheena on her way. There is proof right there, right? Perhaps she did kill herself. But if that was the case, where is her body? As the investigation progressed, there was a $10,000 reward offered for information related to Desheena's disappearance. During the investigation, some interesting facts came up that our good boy John failed a mission. In speaking with friends and family members, they told stories of John being abusive towards Desheena. In fact, one of the neighbors saw him arguing with Desheena a few days prior, hitting her in the head and started choking her. The bystander was going to go help, but John let go of her and walked off. There was also a case in 2014 where John hit her and broke her car window. Charges were filed, but they were later dismissed by the judge. This is some right here. John had even been stalking Desheena, who for a while had been trying to tell the police about how crazy he was. Although it sounds like this guy is a lowlife, there was no evidence of John's involvement in Desheena's disappearance. But they kept him on as a person of interest. Hey, I'm sorry, I know you're into the story, but real quick, if you like these stories, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that every time I release something, you know when I'm releasing it. Okay, thank you, bye. Fast forward, it's been 3 months, and at this time, the police are finally treating this case like a homicide. Because there has been no contact from Desheena and no confirmed sighting, they had to assume the worst. They also went through John and Desheena's phone records. Initially, John had told them that they hadn't seen Desheena in weeks, but the day that she went missing, he had texted her about meeting up for dinner. This does not sound good. This seems mighty suspicious. Why are you telling us you haven't seen her, but yet you were texting her around the time she disappeared? It looks like you're lying, Johnny boy. As the police were canvassing the neighbors, one of them told him that there was a red truck that was seen next to Sheena's place around the time that she went missing. Upon further review, police identified that John had rented a red truck recently. Coincidence? Maybe. The police tracked down the truck that John allegedly rented. Once they found the truck, they pulled the GPS log that was built into the truck to try and pin down John's movements, specifically around the time that Desheena went missing. And what they would find would blow the case wide open. The GPS showed that John went to Desheena's location and left for a little bit, and then came back to her location. He then went out to a faraway area, which didn't seem suspicious at all to the police. That was sarcasm, guys. Of course, a far-out location is like a red flag to the police. The police traveled out to the location and then brought them to a large property with a dilapidated home. They searched around the area and didn't find anything. That was until they proceeded to leave and one of the neighbors came up to them. They asked if they were looking for anything, and they said Desheena's name. The neighbor didn't know her, but when the police said John's name, then the neighbor was like, "Oh yeah, I know that guy." The house on the property belonged to John's great-grandmother, and he would often come out there, although no one had been out there for a while. Intrigued, the police went to search the house. At first, they didn't see anything, at least nothing that jumped out to them. And as they left, they decided, wait, let's check one more place, under the house. It's crazy for them to check underneath there. I wonder if the house sat up so there was a crawl space underneath it. That's kind of what it sounds like it was. As they moved underneath the house, they saw a toolbox that sat there, which is a weird place to have a toolbox, but whatevers. When the police went to the toolbox, the stench met them, and it was a very familiar smell. And when they opened it, they saw a gruesome discovery: a highly decomposed body with the bones sticking out. Although they had no definitive proof at the time, the police guessed that this was probably the remains of Desheena. It had been out there so long that there was so little left of her. The Tennessee sun had accelerated the decomposition of her body. At this point, they knew that John did that shit. But luckily for the police, John was already in jail. He was arrested on an outstanding warrant for drug charges. Once DNA testing came back, they were able to confirm that these were in fact the remains of Desheena. They went back to her home and they did additional DNA testing and searched for any DNA that may be left in her home. Now, John did a good job of cleaning up, but he did not do well enough. They were able to identify places where blood used to be but was cleaned up. John would be then booked for the murder of Desheena. John would later come on to say, I did see Desheena, but she was so mad that we were breaking up, she killed herself. Look at me. Who wouldn't? And well, after that, he knew that no one would believe him. So he proceeded to put her body in a toolbox and carry her all the way out to the abandoned house and bury her underneath the home. He then lied about it for months. Highly believable, John. These criminals be reaching. The autopsy report showed that Desheena had been beaten, but ultimately the cause of her death was a gunshot to the head. And they noted that Desheena was right-handed, so the evidence didn't support that she killed herself, as she had a bullet on the opposite side of her head. You're not too bright, are you, buddy? John was eventually sentenced to life in prison, as he should have been. Today, Desheena's family tries to move on, but it's really hard. Their loved one has been taken away, and they still miss her until this very day. Ladies, if he's putting his hand on you, leave. I know it's hard, but so will making your loved one sad when you're no longer around. Try to document as much information as possible, and if your family are concerned for you and wants to be there for you, let them be there. They may be saving your life.